No! 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 Get it off me! Get it off! Get it off! Ah!
When you've been making waves in the world of cinema and the media landscape as a whole for as long as Godzilla has, you're bound to amass quite a collection of misconceptions. And just to be clear, when I say misconceptions, I'm referring to, more often than not, unfounded Godzilla opinions and takes that damage Goji's reputation in the eyes of both fans and laymen alike. An example of this would be something like, you know, say, Godzilla movies are boring because the human stories suck. Which is a pretty common statement that's and I'm sure some of you have heard many times before. It's actually one of the takes I'm going to be covering a bit later on. It's an idea that could easily dissuade one from watching the films. I mean, I'd know because it's partly why I didn't watch these films when I was younger. That and the fact that most of them aren't easily available to watch. Thank you very much, Toho. Now sure, it's an opinion, but in my experience it's an ill-informed one. Usually spouted by people who haven't seen the films, but hey, it's the internet, so everybody's got to have an opinion, I guess. In this video I'll be covering a wide variety of misconceptions that have no doubt dogged the Godzilla franchise for decades. Whether you're a long-time Godzilla fan that wants to laugh and cringe at the silly takes, or an outsider with an open mind, join me as we take a look at 5 awful Godzilla takes. Number 5. There's no point in watching the movies when Godzilla is barely in them. People that haven't actually seen any kaiju movies just love to hyperfixate on Godzilla's actual screen time when it really doesn't matter. It's not the screen time of Godzilla that matters, it's how that screen time is utilised throughout the duration of the film. There's actually a really good chart created by G-Man on GodzillaMovies.com which compiles Godzilla's screen time in every film. I'll probably leave a link for it in the description so you can check it out yourself. I mean, if you take a closer look at this chart, you'll notice that Godzilla's screen time doesn't really correlate with a good film. It's kind of all over the place. Like the original 1954 film, Godzilla's only in it for 8 minutes and 45 seconds, right? And it's around the same amount of time for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, the first of the 3 Netflix movies. And I know opinions can be subjective and all that, you know, not everyone agrees which Godzilla movies are the best and which are of quality, but I think it's not too controversial to say that the 1954 film is better than the first of the first film of the Netflix trilogy. I don't think I'm going to get any flack for saying that. I remember hearing a lot of people talk about how, you know, Godzilla was barely in Godzilla 2014. He's barely in that movie. Good thing he's featured a lot more in Godzilla King of the Monsters. But if you look at this chart, he's only in it for 15 more seconds. Clearly there's a lot of discrepancies with how people think about Godzilla's screen time and how he actually appeared in the film versus actual screen time in the final run. Why is that the case? Well, it's going back to what I said before. It's about how Godzilla's screen time is actually utilised. From what I've noticed, a good Godzilla movie will splice him in at opportune times. Maybe they'll have a sprinkle of Godzilla in the intro, feature him a tiny bit during the halfway point of the film, and then obviously save most of the Godzilla goodness for the grand finale of the film. Either that or they'll save him up until the end of the midpoint of the movie, where up until that point they've been laying the foundation for Godzilla's eventual appearance. Finally, the way to make Godzilla's screen time actually count is by making his presence be felt throughout the entire movie, even when he's not on screen. -1 came out not too long ago and Godzilla's only in it for like 12 minutes, though it feels a lot longer because even in scenes where he's not present, he feels like a constant threat. Koichi's inaction creates Godzilla, and because we saw that right from the get-go, it feels like his actions are coming back to haunt him throughout the whole film, right up until the climax. That's why that movie ruled, and that's why it's proof that Godzilla's screen time doesn't really matter. Number 4. The movie's the dumb, turn your brain off schlock. I've always hated this quote-unquote complaint, because Godzilla is not a turn your brain off franchise. I mean, sure it has its comical, cheesy moments here and there, but so did stuff like Star Trek. And it never took away from the profound nature of the show in the eyes of the audience, so why is that the case with Godzilla? I feel like it's just kaiju and Japanese movies as a whole have this unique standard where they either have to be the most serious drama of all time, or a family-friendly schlockfest. There can be no in-between. In reality, it's the opposite. A lot of the more famously cherry-picked films, like, I don't know, the entire Showa era, usually fit somewhere neatly in between schlocky goofiness and serious storytelling. Maybe leaning a little towards the goofy side, but still. To debunk this statement, the easy thing would be to point to -1 or 1954 and say, ha, see? You're wrong. But you don't even have to do that. All Monsters Attack is often regarded as the campiest movie of the entire franchise, with cheese galore, but even in that film there's more than meets the eye. The protagonist Ichiro is a latchkey kid, which was a phenomenon that took off in the late 60s, to my knowledge, where children would come home to empty houses, both their parents would be at work. Something that is still fairly common. I mean, I remember having friends that were in that exact circumstance. On top of that, Ichiro is also a victim of bullying, and having no one at home to talk to, he retreats into a kaiju fantasy. That's where we get all the scenes of him mucking about with Manila and Monster Island. Which, yeah, seems like goofy hijinks at first, but it's through those series of events where he eventually learns to be brave and fend for himself. In other words, he creates this elaborate world where Manila inhabits a lot of traits that he also shares, including a bully who is constantly tormenting him. It's in this world of imagination where we see Manila fighting off this imposing bully despite the power imbalance. And given that this is a fantasy created by Ichiro, it shows that clearly on some level he knows he can do something about his bullying. He knows he can stand up to it, but is hesitant to do so until he sees Manila doing it, which inspires him to make his fantasy a reality. It's after he learns that lesson that he stops retreating to Monster Island, finally gaining his own footing. With all that being said, you can probably infer that this movie has a lot more going on than just dumb monster slapfest. All Monsters Attack clearly has something to say, and it's not hard to see how kids could identify with its themes, message and setup. Mind you, I don't even like this film, okay? But despite how I feel about it, the substance is there. And the inherent show of goofiness doesn't take away from it. It's that simple. And that's just one film. The same could be said for almost all of Godzilla's 30+ films. Number 3. Humans' stories are dull and boring. Seriously, I don't know how many times I've heard, why don't the Godzilla movies actually focus on Godzilla instead of the boring lame ass humans, or you know, something along those lines. First of all, Godzilla is the big spectacle of the film. The draw, the part they have to get right. And otherwise the most expensive aspect of the film, so they have to use him and other monsters sparingly. More importantly, the reason why they constantly shove human stories down people's throats is due to the fact that, you know, we are humans. People want to see movies about other humans, or at least human experiences, period, full stop. Even if they don't acknowledge it. The reason the Godzilla movies work is because we get to see various individuals and the world react to his devastation. We see how people's lives are affected by his existence, and it makes us more immersed in the experience when we see other people like us experiencing grief or anger. Or on the other end, sharing in a thrill as we see an average Joe go on a wild adventure. Every kaiju movie features humans. Every movie that isn't about humans features humans. Because we are human. And we relate strongly to human-like ideas, thoughts, emotions and experiences. Even beyond all that, there's just plenty of examples of Godzilla movies with genuinely good human storytelling. I could point to countless unanimously agreed upon good examples, but my personal favourite is still, and I've even made a whole video about it, it's Godzilla vs Mothra, the 1992 version. I loved the humans in this film because the movie constantly dabbles with their allegiances and the way they're perceived by the audience. The protagonist of the film, Takuya, constantly shifts back and forth from douchebag to likeable, to outright hating his guts, to loving him and adoring him. And all those shifts are perfectly believable, because right from the start of the movie we can see that Takuya isn't beyond redemption. Sure, he's a bit of a douchebag here and there, but he's not outright evil. He still cares for his family even if he's not good at showing it. He still has principles and compassion deep down, unlike the main antagonist of the film, the CEO of the Maritomo company who's just outright evil. Takuya can be redeemed and reminded of what's important, which we see perfectly demonstrated in the scene where he reunites with his daughter before he goes off and sells the Shobijin, eventually correcting his mistake and doing the right thing, you know, not selling them off and being a greedy douche. And again, like I said with the previous argument, this is just one example of many. Great human stories aren't a rarity in this franchise, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Number 2, the Godzilla movies are meant for children. This one is just kind of bizarre to me. I don't really have much to say here because 1, I mean, there's a lot of them that simply aren't made for children, and 2, even the ones that are definitely more targeted towards a younger audience, why is that a bad thing? Whenever people say like X film is meant for children, it usually comes with many bad implications. Like, it's got to be inferior, it's got to be shittier, it's got to be a lower standard of quality. But I mean, if you just look at like movies, that's just not the case. There's plenty of amazing and compelling kids movies out there, or movies that are targeted towards younger viewers. I mean, I watched Coco a few days ago, and like, that movie is definitely targeted towards kids, but it had me freaking bawling and sniffling like a baby. Like, I'm fully willing to admit that, but it had that effect on me despite me being a grown-ass man. A movie like that, despite being for kids, should be lauded, no? It should be praised for doing that on audiences, having that effect beyond its target audience. I mean, going back to Godzilla though, I mean, sure, the monster element probably appeals to children more so than it does adults, but as we've already covered, there's plenty of substance that goes just beyond the kaiju themselves. So even if it's true that the Godzilla movies were primarily made for children, which I don't actually believe is the case, I don't see how that changes things. The movies are still an absolute fun watch. You can still adore the monster action as an adult, and plus, themes, subtext and undertones will be a lot more insightful, and you'll be able to glean a lot more from it as an adult. I mean, how is that not a plus? Number 1. Godzilla effects are tacky and cheap. Whenever someone trots out this tired old phrase, you know immediately that they are just full of it. Because there's plenty, and I mean plenty, of jaw-droppingly beautiful practical effects in this franchise. I mean, I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. Just look at Godzilla vs. Biollante. That film has some of the best practical I've seen in a movie, period. It's on par with The Thing in that regard. What with the amount of wires it took to maneuver Biolante's tentacles. And even just look at Biollante herself. I mean, god damn. The suit looks blooming gorgeous. The suit looks blooming gorgeous, and I've only ever seen the film in like 720p recorded Bandicam footage. And even then, the practical effects still gave me pause because of just how beautiful they are. So it's also why I can't wait for the bloody Criterion Blu-ray release of the film, which is coming out next month, by the way. I've already copped my pre-order. I'm gonna watch that shit immediately. I'm assuming that this kind of mentality spawned from people seeing cherry-picked clips like the dropkick from Godzilla vs. Megalon or the Godzilla fly from Godzilla vs. Hedorah, and then assuming, oh, they must all look like crap. They must all be cheap and tacky and rubbish. On top of like countless jokes in Western movies and culture at Godzilla's expense from movies like Austin Powers, for example. So he's always the butt of the joke when it comes to special effects, but people don't really take into account that those moments are supposed to be cheesy and goofy. Like, I mean, if you just watch the scene from Godzilla vs. Hedorah, when he starts flying, just pay attention to the music. It sounds like something you'd have playing in a circus. And it's pretty fitting, because the moment, you know, it is silly, it is goofy, but it's meant to be. And that's what makes the movie so charming in the eyes of many viewers. And of course it goes without saying that those, like I said, they're cherry-picked moments. There's plenty of examples of beautiful special effects in the Showa films. I think it all comes down to different approaches for movie effects. Western stop motion, which was being designed and made concurrently with the suitmation of the Godzilla Showa movies, aimed to simulate realistic movement, whereas the suitmation eventually took on a more out there, unique, sort of crazy take on monster movement. I mean, just compare something like Jason and the Argonauts from 1963 to Godzilla vs. Mothra, which came out a year later in 1964. The skeletons in Argonauts looked amazing for the time, and they still do look pretty good, but what we see in Godzilla vs. Mothra is nothing to overlook. Especially the architectural destruction scenes, which still hold up really well to this day. I don't know how anyone could watch both films and come away with the fact that Godzilla vs. Mothra's effects are terrible, whereas Jason and the Argonaut effects are beautiful and amazing for its time. And there's probably a good reason for that, because most people haven't watched both movies. Anyways, yeah, that's 5 of the most awful arguments against Godzilla. 5 of the most common too. They're sentiments I've heard plenty of times, and it's kind of surprising because I've only been a Godzilla fan for a couple years now. But these kind of complaints you'll always hear from like friends, family members, and just randos online. I don't want to come across as butthurt in this video. Like, yeah, you can have your opinion, but like I said in the intro of the video, these kind of takes aren't really well informed. Often based on preconceived notions or just fabricated based on like a few 1 minute or so clips that they've seen maybe a few times. You know, if you watch the Godzilla movies and then you come away with a take like, I think the human stories are pretty dull and boring in my opinion. Now, you know what? Massive respect. You do you. Okay, the Godzilla movies aren't for everyone. I know because I've tried many times to get people into them, to varying degrees of success. But all I ask is that if you're going to form an opinion on them, at least give them a fair shake before you do. There's a lot of quality in this franchise, and it would be a shame to miss it if you were going off of preconceived notions from other people like I did many years back. So, yeah. That's about all I have to say for this video. Like if you like, dislike if you disliked, subscribe for more quality content, and I'll see you guys next time.
Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried.